Hi, in this video, I'm going to explain to you my solution for the legal compliance AI assistant assignment. When I thought about building a high-stakes legal compliance system, I thought about fail-safe engineering. Take, for example, an elevator. It's not designed on the assumption that its lifting system will never fail. Instead, it has an independent safety mechanisms that prevents one failure from causing a free fall. I followed the same principle in this prototype: reduce failures but also limit the harm when they happen. To understand the system that I built, let's first look at the data that I use. We have synthetic contracts and regulations, and I assume that regulations can be boiled down into deterministic rules or semantic rubric rules or rules that will always require human review. This is an example of a deterministic rule that a legal team can supply us with. The rule contains the information that we require to validate this rule. For example, here we're checking for the existence of daily working hours, working days per week, rest days, and the contract. As you can see, the kind of checks that we're doing, which are required fields, and if these fields are missing from the contract, we classify this rule in the contract as failed. Here is an example of a semantic rule. It requires understanding the meaning of the contracts, so they cannot be evaluated with with the simple code alone. I assume the legal team provide a clear rubric with pass, fail, review criteria. The LLM applied that rubric while local guardrails validate its evidence and decision. If anything is unclear or invalid, the results become review rather than a pass. Now, after we have looked at the regulations, let's look at the flow of the system itself. We assume that the user will supply us with the contract in Markdown file, and it's basically text with paragraphs that contains the clauses of the contract, and also the user will select the jurisdictions. And then we use an LLM to extract the facts that we need to make the decisions about the rules. For example, as we saw in the deterministic rule, we need information from the contract and we ask the LLM to extract this information without making any decision about the rules. And then these facts are supplied to the decision making engine. And this decision making engine consists of two parts: a deterministic code that makes decision based on the rules supplied by the legal team, and also a non-deterministic part which takes the semantic rubric rules and give them to an LLM to check for those rules and decide if it's a pass, fail, or review. But also we add some guardrails on this part to make sure that the LLM fail in a safe way. For example, if it's unsure about its answer, it always gives a review. Or if we notice that the LLM is hallucinating some pass criteria or review criteria or any criteria, then we also classify it as a review. So we take the output from the LLM and validate it before moving on to the next step, which is making a decision about each rule, whether it's a pass, fail, or needs a review or not applicable. Now it's time for the demo. The user uploads an employment contract and selects the jurisdiction. I will use a synthetic Singapore contract containing several intentional edge cases. The system only loads the selected Singapore rule. The first LLM call extracts the facts required by those rules and cites the exact contract text. Local code then validates the extracted facts and evaluate each rule. So as mentioned before, the contract is basically paragraphs, and here we only have five regulations, five rules, and those are the paragraphs that correspond to those rules. And for each one of them, we get either a pass, not applicable, fail, or needs a review. Let's take, for example, this rule. The rule requires having the daily working hours, working days per week, schedule incorporated by the reference and the contract, and the three of them exist in the contract. And it also requires the rest day. So the rest day is not included in the contract. So when the system detected that it's missing, it labeled this rule as fail for this contract. Here in this rule, it was classified as review. It needs human review and it requires salary period, basic salary amount, salary currency, etc. And it correctly classified the month that the salary period is monthly. It classified basic salary and the currency and fixed allowance. But here, when we look at the words of the contract, we see that it says all-inclusive salary. However, we are searching for the basic salary. So here, this can make like the system a bit confused because it couldn't say for sure what is the basic salary of the contract. So when it's when it's uncertain, it asks for the human review. And also here, when the human can look at this rule and look at the paragraphs supplied from the contract, the human can decide, okay, AI result is correct, it like change to pass, change to fail, and a change to not applicable. And later we can also export uh, the contract after the human reviewed all of the rules. That's it from my side. Thank you for your attention. I really enjoyed working on this project and I'm very excited for our meeting to discuss my work.